Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2024 Ford F250 Super Duty, we're going to be showing you how to install the Air Lift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle. Before we do that though, let's take a minute, we'll check these out and make sure they're going to be the right setup for you. So even though these trucks now are super heavy duty, they can handle a ton of weight, people still find themselves needing a little bit of extra support just to help, make the ride a little bit better and have some adjustability and things like that. Because when you get to pulling big old trailers around these campers and fifth wheels, goosenecks, so on and so forth, having a suspension enhancement can really go a long way. Here's what the airbags are going to look like installed underneath your truck. And it's a really simple concept. They're just going to fill that void between the bottom of your frame and the top of your axle housing. And they're really just going to replace your factory style jounce bumpers here, which what these are for is just to prevent your truck suspension from bottoming out. They're really not doing anything extra to help the suspension out at all. With that said, what an airbag or air spring like this is going to help combat is several different things. One of the big ones being truck sag, right, or squat. Whenever you got a bunch of weight back here or hooked up to your trailer or whatever, it's pretty well known that the back end squats down, the front end lifts up. But by having an air spring, you can inflate it full of air and get it leveled back out again. And that's going to just help with your overall towing experience. What I found air springs being really beneficial in combating is body roll, meaning, when you make a turn, you can feel the top of the truck kind of get heavy and then takes a second to rebound and get straight on the road again. With these, it just seems to really help out a lot with that and make the ride a whole lot better. Matter of fact, this was several weeks ago. We had a truck in here and it had a huge stainless steel dog kennel in it, more or less. They'd run dogs and everything. And this truck was so bad you barely turned a wheel and it felt like it was about to tip over. We ended up putting air springs on it and it made night and day difference. And that's pretty much my personal experience with all different types of trucks. I've done a lot of these on these Fords, Chevys, Dodges, GMCs, you name it, and the results are all pretty much the same. I mentioned pulling fifth wheels and goosenecks around, so a lot of people probably wondering, are these going to work if my truck has an in-bed hitch? And the answer is yes. Good example today, we have the factory puck system from Ford on our truck here. Airbag's going to have any issues bolting up or anything along those lines. As far as the aftermarket and bed hitches go, it's hard to speak for every single one across the board, but generally speaking, you should be fine. A lot of the ways those hitches are going to bolt up are extremely similar, and how the airbags get installed, you should not really run into any issues there as far as interference or anything along those lines. With that said, these are going to work with trucks that are four-wheel drive. If you have a two-wheel drive, there's definitely other options out there that you can look into, but with this particular kit, it's four-wheel drive only, which most of the trucks are set up that way anyway, and it'll work if you have a gas engine or a diesel engine. So nothing too much to worry about there as far as that goes. And these are going to be able to handle up to 5,000 pounds. So that's the load carrying capacity. With that in mind, that's just the weight that these can bear. That's not going to add to your truck's overall weight carrying capacity. So keep that in mind. And to compare these to some of the other ones, so for example, these springs have the internal jounce bumpers. So if you remember that factory jounce bumper that I showed you, imagine that built inside of the airbag, more or less. And then there's a kit that looks just like these, some minor differences, but those are not going to have the internal jounce bumpers. And you might be wondering, well, what's the difference? And with the internal jounce bumpers, at times you might get a little bit better of a ride, but in my opinion, I think they're there more as a fail-safe. So for example, since that internal jounce bumper is inside, if if the bag did fail or have a big leak or something like that while you're out on the road, and you were towing a heavy load, that internal jounce bumper would prevent everything from completely bottoming out. There is a Firestone airbag kit available for this truck as well, and from my personal experience, honestly, I think the Air Lift is a better fit for this truck. And I say it because everything just goes together easier, it mounts up, there's a lot less parts and stuff going on. It's just more simple, and in my opinion, that's good, right? Easier the better, less stuff that could go wrong. As far as the adjustability goes of these, so you got to have a minimum of 5 pounds of air in the bags at all times, and that's pretty much the standard across all these different manufacturers, is so you don't potentially cause damage to the bag. And it has a maximum of 100 psi. So pretty big swing there. You can really dial it in and fine-tune everything. Most people find themselves somewhere in the middle, when they're towing. And to make all that easier, something that you can do is get an onboard air compressor kit, which lets you make those changes more or less on the fly very easily. And that's exactly what we have on our truck here today. Here's an example of what we got going on. So our compressor kit, it's a wireless one, which is what I recommend on this truck. Just because inside of the truck you don't really have a ton of room to mount up gauges. But this one's made by Firestone, and that kind of leads me to my next point. If you do get a compressor kit, it doesn't care what brand of bags you got. They're going to be compatible. This one seems to work pretty good. The one that I'm a big fan of, had a lot of good luck with it. It is made by Air Lift. It's called the Wireless One, easy mount, and that's a good choice as well. After all this, if you've come to kind of tell yourself, I don't think an air spring kit is going to be right for my particular situation, might just be overkill for what you need or something like that, but you still want something, the good news is there's a lot of different types of enhancements out there. For example, timbering, it's pretty much just a big oversized jounce bumper that gives you support when you need it and doesn't when you don't. The thing is with them, they're really simple, no maintenance or anything, but you don't have that adjustability and you kind of get what you get. So ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you and how you use your truck. As far as the installation goes, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, really not too bad. Everything's tight under here for the most part, but a lot of this, thankfully, you can build on your tool bench and then kind of stuff everything up at once under the truck. So shouldn't really, run into too many issues or take up a bunch of your time. But if you're going to be doing this yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on them now. To begin your installation, you're going to be here at the back of your truck. And first thing that I did was just temporarily lower and remove the spare tire. It just gives you a lot more room to work. And then we need to support our truck in a way to where the suspension is going to be unloaded. So since I'm on a drive-on lift, I'm just using this pull jack here to raise the frame of the truck up. But for those of you at home, if you're using a jack and jack stands, you want to jack up the truck by the actual frame. We're able to remove our factory jounce bumpers now, and so these are just going to be held in place with two 15mm head nuts. Go ahead and get this removed and do the same thing on the other side of our truck. We can pop out these fasteners now, so just take a flathead screwdriver, kind of pry on that metal piece there. You can work these out. It'll be the same thing for other side of our truck, and we won't be reinstalling them. What we can do now is grab these pieces, and these are going to replace those that factory hardware that we removed out of the frame. And I'm going to try something here because these are kind of tough to get lined up and everything. I'm going to take 2 of these bolts. These are going to be the ones that will eventually stay in here, and just thread them in a couple turns. And I feel like these will give us a little handle to grab onto and work with, and make it a little easier to get everything lined up. Ways are going to work, they're going to slide in here, and you want this part, part that the bolt's going to go through, to kind of be in this area here, further to the end there. So take these and push them into place, and in theory it should make it easier to line everything up, because once they stop, that's as far as you can get it with the bolt in there. So that one feels good. I'll take our bolt out and do the same thing for one here in the back. We can grab our upper brackets now, and we need to build these to where they're going to be side specific. So what you're looking for example, we're on the driver's side. This elongated hole here, you want that to face towards the front of the truck. And I like to just write it down, so I have a reference. And then this portion here that's kind of cut in or ramped in there, you want that to face inboard, so towards the center of the truck. And then from there, you can take 4 of these short carriage bolts, drop them down into each corner. With the carriage bolts, you want to make sure that the square portion towards the head of the bolt actually sits flat into the square opening there. I'll take our bracket and the bolts that we talked about earlier, and those are going to thread into those pieces that we put into the frame. Get both of them started and tight here. And we'll snug them down. So I'm using a 6mm size Allen key here. And I'm going to change this out for a torque wrench, and we're going to tighten these down to the amount specified in the instructions. And anytime you come back and torque a bolt down, you can find all those specs in the instruction manual. Just over here on the driver's side, we're going to have this bracket that's holding on some wiring and some brake lines and a vent tube. This harness here, it's attached and kind of loops around and goes under. It's attached there too. We're going to pop that free. I'm just using a trim tool, but you can use a flathead screwdriver, work just fine as well. The reason for this, we're going to be repositioning it to give us some more room here. With that harness kind of unclipped here, the kit is going to come with this bracket, all right? And you can take that push pin fastener, clip it into there like that, and then this is going to line up with this stock bracket here, like so. And what you can do is take this bolt, all right, and a flat washer. You'll run that through there. And then on the back side, just take a flange nut get that started. We'll snug it down with a 9/16. Then we'll come back and torque it. To help pull the wiring down even more, I just came back with a zip tie. I'm going to pull that slack out and zip tied it down. We can start to assemble our air spring now. And this is just the way that I like to do this. You take this fitting, and on the top side of the air spring, you'll see 3 holes, and one of them will be wide open. That's where we're going to put this. And so just start it by hand. If I can manage to line it up here, there we go. And so get it as tight as you can by hand, and then you can come back with a 1/2-inch size wrench and give it an additional turn and a half. So there's 1. That's about 1 1/2. And from here, you can take your air line, all right, and roughly cut it in about half. I usually cut one side a foot or so longer because the passenger side of our truck, we're gonna have to, it'll be a little bit longer of a route to get this to where we're gonna mount up our fittings, but and half is fine too. And when you cut air line, you wanna make sure and get a good, clean, straight cut on it. So I like to use a tool like this. There's also airline tubing cutter tools designed for this stuff. Or, it's kind of odd tools to have. You can take a utility knife, set this on a block of wood, and cut it that way too. You want to avoid a regular pair of snips because it don't really leave a clean cut and then it'll probably leak. So I'll just give you an example here. It's about how you want it to look. No burrs, it's not pinched or anything along those lines. And what I like to do is plug it into our fitting and just throw some air in it. And I'm not going to get carried away here. Put a little pressure in the bag, and we can check for leaks now if you have any leaks around these brass fittings, or if we need to tighten this up more, because once this is in place under the truck, say if this is loose and leaking, it's going to be really hard to get to. So how you check for leaks on fittings and everything in general, once it's pressurized, you can spray soapy water on it. And what you're looking for, if you see bubbles continuously and rapidly forming, you know you have a leak. Looks like we're all sealed up here, but let's say if this was leaking a little bit, sure, it's much easier to, turn this an extra little bit, tighten it down, and do what you got to do here, as opposed to being underneath the truck where you can't hardly see and get to anything. So we're in good shape. We'll just put some on the bottom of our fittings. That way, if there happens to be, some type of defect or something got damaged in shipping or something, we can catch it now and don't have to deal with it underneath the truck. But rather be safe than sorry. So it looks like we're in good shape here. I'll go ahead, let the air out of our bag. And let's say if you did, once we get all these together, let's say if you did have a leak here at this connection point, right? The way you get this air line out, there's this little collar deal. You kind of push that, and that's how you pull the air line out. And so if it were leaking there, you would want to come back, once everything's together, of course, you'd want to come back and recut it clean, plug it in, and check it again. I dried off our assembly, that way we didn't have water and moisture in there. But now you can take a roll plate, got this big opening there, you can slide that on top of the bag, and then we're going to have these plates, these upper plates, all right? And so the way this is going to set, since we're on the driver's side, so if that's the front of the truck, this would be inboard. You want this to face towards the center of the truck. Your bracket here, you want the part where it kind of ramps up to face towards the front of the truck. And so this is going to set on there like that. All right, and then you can take this bolt, split lock washer, the flat washer, thread them into the airbag. Same deal, this attachment point. Get them started hand tight. Got a 9/16. Snug them up. And you can torque them down. We can flip our assembly over now and remember what side this fitting is on. All right, so I'm going to flip it over like this. So now our fitting is on this side, right? You have another roll plate. It'll set on there like that. And then we'll have this big bracket and these two holes here. Got these super long carriage bolts. Just drop them down through there. Flip this over like that. All right, and so remember what side that fitting is on, because you want this side of the bracket to face away from the fitting. So we're in good shape here. Get this stuff lined up. You can take this bolt, a little tapered bolt with a hex set opening there. We'll get those started. We'll torque these down. I have a 7/32 Allen key. Get them completely tight. We're still going to have one square opening in that lower bracket. With that, you can take one of the smaller carriage bolts, drop that through, and if I rotate this, I'll stand it up right here. You're going to have to kind of hold that carriage bolt so it don't fall. But we're going to have this cup deal here, and that'll go over that long carriage bolt. And that slot will line up with the small carriage bolt that we just put in. And then you can take a flange nut, just get it tight enough by hand to where, you know, it'll keep it steady, but you're still able to kind of slide this back and forth and adjust it if needed. Take your whole assembly now, and before you put this in, you want to make sure that your air fitting is pointed this way. You know, if it's like this and you put it up there, you have a hard time getting your air line in. So make sure of that. And this is just going to go in through here. Definitely a little tight, so get prepared for that. It's not too bad though. And what we're going to do, the holes in our upper bracket, so you'll line up with those carriage bolts. Like that. And I'm just going to take a flange nut, and on each corner, just get a couple threads started. Doing this to more or less just keep this in place. What I'm going to do now is just you know, let some pressure off of my jack to let the truck come down and kind of close the gap a little bit. to get us in a better position how the bag will actually be seated and lined up when we're going down the road. As far as the bottom of our air spring assembly goes, you want that to sit, sit good. Push it up flat against the leaf spring pack as far as you can. And then you can take this big U-bolt, going to go around our leaf spring pack. And you want to feed that through the uppermost hole on each side of our bracket. And you can take a flat washer and a nylon lock nut. Get that going on each side. Once you have that hardware started, come back with a 9/16 deep well and just snug them down, again, to kind of hold everything together. When you're tightening up a U-bolt or anything like this, you want to alternate evenly. So, run this down for 3, 4, 5 seconds, do the other one, kind of go back and forth. You have our axle strap. Feed that through these long carriage bolts, and that's going to sit up, about like that. And then, same deal as our U-bolt. Just put on a flat washer and a nylon lock nut on each end. I'm going to tighten these up too, but I'm not going to put any pressure up on this just yet. I'll get it real close though, but just don't want it hanging down super far while we're trying to work here. Now you want to come back to the hardware up top here and get it completely torqued down to the specs and the instructions. What you want to do now is lower the truck down completely. That way the suspension's loaded and you have all the weight kind of set up on the air spring as it'll be going down the road. And I snugged these down. Come back, get these torqued. Once these are torqued, then you want to come back and torque down the U-bolts that actually go around your leaf spring pack. Once you have the driver's side done, you're going to do the same exact thing over here to get the passenger side installed. There's a couple of minor differences. If you remember, on the driver's side we had that bracket that we used and bolted to here to kind of relocate some wiring. You don't have to worry about that. Something I want to point out though, make sure that this piece of wiring isn't going to get smashed by the carriage bolt. And you want the carriage bolt to go on the outside of your brake line. That's how you want it to sit. What I did too, just to make a little protector, I actually took maybe 1.5 inches of our airline tubing and I cut a slice down the middle and I was able to put it on our brake line. There, just put it around it. That way if it does happen to bounce and rub or something, we have a good thick layer of protection to help keep it in good shape. Something else you need to do on the passenger side, since our exhaust is right here, the kit comes with this heat shield, and I just put a bend in these tabs like that and slightly bent this in. They give you these worm clamps, connect them together, and this is going to do like this and clamp around the exhaust. So being that it's kind of tight in here, I'll just get this set up and show you how it turned out. Here's how our heat shield turned out. Really nothing to it, just put it facing towards the bag. That way it'll create a void there and help deflect heat away from the actual air spring. We can get our air lines routed now. I want to mention, when you're doing the passenger side, before you plug this into the fitting on the bag, they give you this thermal sleeve. Just put that on, and this will end up where the air line is going to be closest to the exhaust. So I'll go ahead and get these lines routed and then show you the path that I took. I got our air lines routed, and we'll just start with the passenger side one. When you're routing these things, you want to make sure to avoid any hot or moving parts or really sharp metal edges, or putting really sharp bends in the line to kink it, stuff like that. So it comes right out of the bag, and then follows some factory wiring along the frame towards the back of the truck. And every now and again, I just zip tied it up, keep it secure. And then it's going to come through here. We got a big factory wire harness that runs all the way over to the driver's side. Where I have it looping there, and it kind of comes through this little opening down in here. On the driver's side, same story pretty much, comes right out of the bag, and I have it secured to this big bundle of factory wiring harness that it runs all the way back, and again it drops down and will come out through this opening. Here's a better look at where both of our air lines ended up coming through that opening there, and they just come straight back. And this is where I have them mounted up. So I use this, it's a Firestone bracket actually, but our neighbor here, he's going to be using a Firestone compressor. And so I looked through that kit and it came with this. So I figured, why not use it? I'm a big fan of these. You can grab them separately though, if you want. If not, there's a bunch of different ways you can mount up these valves. If I don't use the bracket, I usually just replace the license plate screws with these. But there's a bunch of different options and suggestions in the instructions. You can check and kind of do whatever you see works best. But the way you're going to set these up, all right, I like to do them side specific too. That way this one's driver, this one's passenger. Makes it easy to keep track of. Just take the airline, you put a nut on it. I run them all the way down. And then a star washer. And then you'll feed it through where you're going to secure it. You got this rubber washer there. A flat washer. And then you take a hex nut. Get it started. And I really don't crank these down, tighten them down super tight by any means. I just take a 1/2 inch size socket, a deep well, and just do it by hand. As soon as it starts to get snug, call it good. With everything wrapped up now, we're going to throw some air in the bags. There's a suggested amount in the instructions. That way we can check for any leaks or clearance issues, things of that nature. Went ahead, sprayed everything down and checked for leaks like we showed you earlier. Then just visually check, make sure you're not going to have any clearance issues or things like that, which more than enough room under here. And at this point, you can reinstall your spare tire. I'm going to hold off on that because, like I said, I'm going to be doing a compressor kit too, and leaving that off will just give me more room to work. But with all that done, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Air Lift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle on our 2024 Ford F250.